And here's an article which is interesting for those, especially if you want to study international relations at university, because this article looks at the sort of benefits for Israelis and Palestinians, but also for the rest of the world in a one-state solution. But it also explains some of the reasons why this scholar, Sama Habib, thinks that it could be possible. And it's important to see that this was 2016, when ISIS was a real threat, when ISIS had made massive gains, capitalizing on the chaos of the Syrian civil war, and were looking like they were going to be a major power, and perhaps even a lasting sort of state in the region. Interestingly, I'm giving this lecture a couple of days after the attack on the Crocus Hall in Russia, carried out by a sort of branch of the Islamic State. And therefore, the Islamic State, is clearly not dead. And therefore, this argument may also not be entirely outdated. But essentially, perhaps the most interesting part of the article, or the most relevant part for us, is that it essentially is an argument that the one-state solution is possible because of wider international forces. So it uses something called the theory of ripeness, which is essentially a theory of diplomacy and international relations, that there are certain times when negotiations are much more likely to be successful. And the reason why Sama Habib thought that 2016, and perhaps a little bit afterwards, it would be interesting if we could ask her what her views were now, since October the 7th, I imagine they'd be less optimistic, and that negotiations now would be a very, very bad idea because tensions and emotions are so high. However, in 2016, she thought that it was a good time for negotiation because ISIS represented a common threat. So ISIS or Daesh or the Islamic State were, she thought, a threat to Israel, but also to Palestinians, because the Islamic State were attacking a lot of other Islamic countries and imposing very conservative forms of theocratic rule, or really military rule. And therefore, Habib's argument was that both of these countries or people will feel very vulnerable because of the gains made by the Islamic State, and as a result, that they will be open to negotiation, and therefore that ripeness will lead to a decision to negotiate, and in that decision, what she thinks makes the most rational sense would be one strong state to resist against threats in the region, such as the Islamic State.